I've always been a bit of an oddball in Maple Creek Estates. Not by choice, mind you, but because my house sits nearly a quarter-mile back from the main road. When I purchased the property 5 years ago, that long, winding driveway was actually a selling point. Privacy in the suburbs is a rare commodity, and I'd scored the jackpot. A beautiful colonial home nestled against a small wooded area, invisible from the street, connected to civilization only by that graceful ribbon of asphalt. The previous owner, an elderly widow, had warned me about the Maple Creek Homeowners Association during closing. They're particular, she'd said with a knowing smile. But I'd lived with HOAs before. Follow the rules, keep your lawn mowed, don't paint your house neon pink, simple enough. For the first 3 years, life was peaceful. I attended the occasional HOA meeting, paid my dues on time, and even volunteered for the neighborhood cleanup day. My neighbors were pleasant, if a bit distant. The board president, Gerald Thompson, a retired accountant with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual frown, nodded stiffly whenever we crossed paths at the community mailboxes. That all changed when the HOA board had its changing of the guard. Gerald stepped down, and in came Diane Keller, a woman whose commitment to rules bordered on religious fervor. Diane had moved to Maple Creek from some master-planned community in Florida and immediately set about bringing standards up to par. Within a month, violation notices tripled across the neighborhood. I was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing until that crisp October morning when I found the letter in my mailbox. The envelope bore the official Maple Creek HOA logo, a stylized maple leaf that now seemed more threatening than decorative. Inside was a single-page notice, the text as cold as the autumn air. Dear homeowner, it has come to the attention of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association Board that your property is in violation of Covenant 7.3.2. No residential driveway shall exceed 75 feet in length without special exemption. You are hereby notified that your driveway, measuring approximately 1,320 feet, is in significant violation of this covenant. The board requires you to submit a remediation plan within 30 days of this notice. Failure to comply may result in fines of up to $100 per day until the violation is corrected. Sincerely, Diane Keller, President, Maple Creek Homeowners Association. I read the letter 3 times, convinced it was some kind of joke. My driveway had existed long before the development was even built. The house predated the HOA by at least 40 years. How could they suddenly decide my driveway was a violation? What I didn't know then, as I stood at the end of my very long, apparently illegal driveway, crumpling that letter in my fist, was that this was the beginning of a battle that would change everything. And that sometimes the best revenge isn't just getting even, it's getting creative. My first instinct was to call the HOA and point out the absurdity of their complaint. Surely this was just an oversight. My property had been grandfathered in when the development expanded around it. At least that's what my real estate agent had assured me. Diane Keller answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Mrs. Keller, this is Alex Morgan from 47 Maple Creek Drive. I received a notice about my driveway, and I think there's been a mistake. There's no mistake, Mr. Morgan. The sound of shuffling papers came through the line. The covenant is quite clear, 75 feet maximum without exemption. But my house was built decades before the HOA even existed. Surely it's grandfathered in. I'm looking at your file right now. More shuffling. When the previous owner sold to you, the property became subject to our updated covenants. There was a clause in your purchase agreement, page 47, paragraph 3, I believe. I remembered signing a stack of documents during closing, but who reads page 47, paragraph 3 of anything? That can't be right, I said. What am I supposed to do? Move my house closer to the street? That would be one solution. She didn't even sound like she was joking. Alternatively, you could apply for a special exemption, but I should warn you, the board hasn't approved one well, ever. I took a deep breath. Can we discuss this at the next HOA meeting? Of course, you're entitled to make your case, but the 30-day remediation deadline stands. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the following week, which gave me time to prepare my argument and rally some support. I went door to door, talking to neighbors about the absurdity of the situation. Many were sympathetic, especially those who'd recently received their own violation notices for infractions like excessive bird feeders and non-compliant mailbox posts. But few were willing to speak up against Diane and her board. On the night of the meeting, I arrived early, presentation folder in hand. The conference room at the community center was already half full. Diane sat at the center of a long table at the front, flanked by the rest of the board. Tom Wilson, a corporate lawyer with a permanent Bluetooth earpiece. Margaret Simmons, a retired school principal with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun. And Chuck Davis, a local real estate developer whose company had built half the homes in Maple Creek. When my turn came to speak, I approached the podium with confidence. As many of you know, my property at 47 Maple Creek Drive predates this development by decades. The driveway in question has existed in its current form since 1973. It would be financially prohibitive and logistically impossible to shorten it without essentially demolishing my home and rebuilding it closer to the road. I presented photos, property records, and even a statement from the City Historical Society confirming the age and original configuration of the property. Diane listened with a thin smile that never reached her eyes. When I finished, she glanced at her fellow board members before responding. "Mr. Morgan, we appreciate your thoroughness, but the covenant is not ambiguous. The previous board may have been lax in enforcement, but we're committed to maintaining property values and community standards." "This is ridiculous," I said, my frustration boiling over. "You're asking me to do something physically impossible." "Not impossible," Chuck Davis interjected. "My company could certainly relocate your house. It's just a matter of budget." Of course, Chuck's construction company would be happy to take on such a lucrative project. "And how much would that cost?" I asked. "Ballpark? $300,000, plus permits." Murmurs rippled through the room. Even for Maple Creek, that was an outrageous sum. "Or," Diane added, "you could apply for a variance. The application fee is only $1,500, non-refundable, of course." It was a shakedown, plain and simple. Either pay Chuck's company a fortune to move my house, or pay the HOA $1,500 for a variance they had no intention of granting. "I'll think about it," I said coldly. As I gathered my materials to leave, my next-door neighbor, Ellen Fitzgerald, a retired attorney in her 70s, touched my arm. "Don't give up so easily, dear," she whispered. "There's more than one way to skin a cat, or in this case, an HOA." Ellen invited me over for coffee the next morning. Her living room was lined with legal texts, remnants from her 40 years practicing real estate law. "That driveway of yours," she said, pouring me a cup of strong black coffee, "it's quite unusual for a residential property." "That's what the HOA keeps telling me." No. I mean, it's unusually well constructed. I noticed it's wider than most driveways, almost 20 feet across in some spots." I nodded. The previous owner mentioned her husband had it built to commercial specifications. He collected vintage cars and wanted to make sure his larger vehicles could navigate it easily. Ellen's eyes twinkled. "And it has those nice concrete culverts for drainage, proper crowning for water runoff. It's practically a road." "What are you getting at, Ellen?" She reached for a thick binder labeled Westlake County Municipal Codes and flipped to a section marked with a yellow tab. "According to county regulations, what legally constitutes a private road versus a driveway isn't just about who uses it, it's about specifications." She pointed to a paragraph dense with technical jargon. "Minimum width, construction materials, drainage requirements, load-bearing capacity. Your driveway might actually qualify as a private road under county definitions." I read over the section, understanding dawning. "And if it's a road, not a driveway?" "Then it's not subject to the HOA covenant about driveway length," Ellen finished, smiling over her coffee cup. For the next 2 weeks, I dove into research. I took measurements of my driveway, consulted with a civil engineer who confirmed it was indeed built to commercial standards, and pored over county records. Ellen introduced me to Bill Connors, a city planner nearing retirement who had no love for overzealous HOAs. "Your property is interesting," Bill said, examining my plat maps in his cluttered office. "It's technically part of the Maple Creek subdivision now, but it was originally a separate parcel that got partially absorbed. That long stretch of driveway, it's actually on a separate tax lot." "A separate tax lot?" I leaned forward, intrigued. Yep, when they incorporated your property into the HOA, they included the house parcel, but this strip, he traced the driveway on the map, is still listed separately. Looks like an oversight. This was getting better by the minute. And here's where it gets interesting, Bill continued. This connecting strip isn't zoned residential. It's zoned as a utility corridor with an access easement. What does that mean exactly? It means you could potentially register it as a private access road rather than a residential driveway. And as a separate tax parcel, you could argue it's not even subject to the residential covenants. I left Bill's office with copies of maps, zoning information, and a recommendation for a real estate attorney who specialized in land use issues. 3 days later, I was sitting across from Angela Kim Esquire, outlining my situation. So let me get this straight, Angela said, reviewing my documents. You want to convert your driveway into a legal private road to circumvent the HOA covenant. Exactly. And according to these specs, it already meets county requirements for a private road. I nodded. And it's on a separate tax parcel that was never properly incorporated into the HOA governance. That's what the city planner said. Angela leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. Mr. Morgan, I think we have a very interesting case here. But if we're going to do this, why stop halfway? What do you mean? If you're going to establish a private road, you might as well exercise all the rights that come with it. She pulled out a different code book, including the right to regulate access to your private road, Section 143.7 of the County Transportation Code. Owners of private roads may establish reasonable access controls and usage fees for non-easement holders. My eyes widened as the implications sank in. Are you saying I could charge a toll? Legally, yes, as long as you maintain an easement for emergency vehicles and respect any existing recorded easements. For the first time since receiving that HOA notice, I laughed out loud. How quickly can we file the paperwork? Over the next month, Angela and I developed a comprehensive plan. The process of converting a driveway to a private road involved several steps: registration with the county, proper signage, an official name, recorded easements, and a maintenance plan. The cost wasn't insignificant, about $7,000 in legal fees, permits, and necessary upgrades, but it was far less than relocating my house or fighting an endless battle with the HOA. What are you going to name it? Ellen asked one evening as we reviewed the paperwork on my kitchen table. I thought for a moment. Keller Lane. Ellen burst out laughing. You're deliciously petty. I love it. Actually, no, I reconsidered. Too obvious. How about Liberty Way? Perfect. The toll system was the next consideration. I didn't want anything too elaborate, just enough to make my point. Bill from the city planning office referred me to a transportation engineer who designed a simple electronic system with a gate arm and keycard access. You'll need to establish a formal fee schedule, Angela advised. It can be as simple or complex as you want, but it needs to be documented and consistently applied to avoid claims of discrimination. I worked up a schedule that gave me plenty of flexibility. Annual unlimited access pass, $250. Monthly access pass, $50. Single-use access, $5. Emergency vehicles, free access. Delivery and service vehicles, free access with proof of service. The beauty of the system was that I could issue free passes to anyone I wanted, friends, neighbors I liked, the mail carrier, while technically maintaining a fee schedule for others. As we prepared to implement the plan, Angela recommended we keep things quiet. The HOA can't stop you legally, but they could make things difficult if they realize what you're doing. Better to present them with a fait accompli. Chuck Davis from the HOA board owned a construction company that would normally handle this type of work, but using him would tip our hand. Instead, we contracted with a firm from the next county over. The workers were puzzled by some aspects of the job, but didn't ask too many questions when I explained I was improving my private road for safety reasons. The most challenging part was timing the project completion to coincide with the end of the HOA's 30-day notice period. I'd requested an extension to develop a remediation plan, which Diane had grudgingly granted, no doubt expecting me to cave and pay for the variance application. Little did she know what was coming. The transformation of my excessive driveway into Liberty Way took just under 3 weeks. The construction crew added proper signage at both ends, installed reflective markers along the curves, and enhanced the existing drainage system to fully comply with county road standards. The toll gate was positioned near the entrance of the property, just far enough from the main road to allow cars to pull in without blocking traffic. It was a simple but official-looking setup, a mechanical arm with a keycard reader and a small digital display for the toll amount. For those without keycards, a weatherproof intercom system connected to my smartphone allowed me to remotely grant access. Angela filed all the necessary paperwork with the county, and Liberty Way was officially recorded as a private road with me as the registered owner. We also filed the access control plan, complete with the fee schedule and easement provisions. The final touch was the sign, a tasteful green marker with white lettering reading, Liberty Way, private road, access control enforced. Below it, a smaller sign displayed the toll schedule and a QR code linking to a simple website where regular users could apply for monthly or annual passes. On the day before the HOA's deadline, we received the final inspection approval from the County Transportation Department. The inspector, an older gentleman with a salt and pepper mustache, couldn't help but chuckle as he signed off on the paperwork. "Never seen anything quite like this before," he admitted. "But everything meets code, and your paperwork is in order. Liberty Way is officially a private road." I thanked him and handed him a complimentary annual access pass, which he pocketed with a wink. That evening, I printed copies of all the official documentation, including the county's certification of Liberty Way as a private road, the separate tax parcel information, and the approved access control plan. I placed it all in a binder labeled HOA Remediation Plan. The last step was programming the keycards. I created one for myself, of course, plus extras for Ellen and my other supportive neighbors. I also programmed passes for regular delivery services, emergency vehicles, and utility workers. As for the HOA board members, well, they would have the privilege of experiencing the toll system firsthand. I went to bed that night with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt since childhood Christmas Eves. Tomorrow would be quite a day. The next morning, I drove to Diane Keller's house and dropped the remediation plan binder in her mailbox with a note requesting confirmation of compliance. Then I returned home to wait. I didn't have to wait long. At precisely 10:17 a.m., my doorbell camera alerted me to a visitor. Diane was standing at my front door, binder clutched in her white-knuckled grip, face flushed with either embarrassment or anger, probably both. I took my time answering. "Good morning, Diane. Lovely day, isn't it? What is the meaning of this?" She thrust the binder toward me. "That's my remediation plan as requested by the HOA. I believe you'll find everything in order." This is preposterous. You can't just turn your driveway into a road and start charging people to use it. Actually, as the documentation shows, it was never properly a driveway to begin with. It's on a separate tax parcel, built to commercial specifications, and has now been officially designated as a private road by the county. She flipped frantically through the binder. But the covenant clearly states, the covenant addresses residential driveways, which Liberty Way is not. Furthermore, the covenant only applies to properties within the HOA's jurisdiction. This road parcel, as you can see from the plat maps, was never properly incorporated into the HOA. Diane's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice again. "The board will not stand for this. The board is welcome to contest it legally, of course. My attorney assures me my position is quite solid." As if on cue, a car pulled up to the new toll gate at the entrance of Liberty Way. It was Tom Wilson, the lawyer from the HOA board, no doubt summoned by a frantic call from Diane. I smiled. "Excuse me, I need to attend to a customer." I left Diane sputtering on my doorstep and walked down to the gate where Tom was examining the toll sign with a mixture of disbelief and grudging professional appreciation. "Morning, Tom," I called cheerfully. "Will you be paying by card or cash today?" "This is ridiculous, Morgan. You know this won't stand." "It already has. The county has approved it, and all paperwork is filed and recorded. You're welcome to review the documentation. Diane has a copy. Now, about that toll." Tom glared at me for a long moment, then reached for his wallet and extracted a $5 bill, which he practically threw at me. "This isn't over," he warned as I raised the gate to let him through. Actually, I think it is. Unless, of course, you'd like to purchase a monthly pass, it's more economical for frequent visitors. By afternoon, word had spread throughout Maple Creek Estates. Cars drove slowly past the entrance to Liberty Way, residents gawking at the new signage. Ellen hosted an impromptu celebratory coffee gathering where neighbors alternated between disbelief, amusement, and admiration. You should have seen Margaret Simmons' face when she had to pay the toll, reported Ellen's husband Frank. I thought she was going to swallow her pearls. Not everyone was supportive. Several HOA loyalists sent angry emails or left voicemails demanding I stop this nonsense immediately. But many more residents, especially those who had suffered under Diane's regime of petty violations, quietly cheered me on. By evening, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. It was Chuck Davis, the developer. "Morgan," he said without preamble, "I'll give you $20,000 for the road parcel." "Not for sale, Chuck. $30,000. Still no." "Look, this is embarrassing for the board. Let's be reasonable here." I am being reasonable. I've fully complied with county regulations and established a legitimate private road. If the board finds that embarrassing, perhaps they should reconsider their approach to covenant enforcement. There was a long pause. "What do you want, Morgan?" "I want the board to acknowledge that my property, including Liberty Way, is in full compliance with all applicable regulations." "And the toll?" "The toll stands. It's my private road." Another pause. "I'll take it to the board." 2 days later, I received an official letter from the Maple Creek HOA acknowledging that my property was currently in compliance with applicable covenants. It was signed by all board members, even Diane, though her signature looked like it had been carved into the paper with a knife. Victory had never tasted so sweet. Life with a private toll road had unexpected benefits beyond the satisfaction of watching HOA board members grudgingly pay to access my property. First, there was the matter of traffic. Before, delivery trucks, lost tourists, and even some neighbors used my long driveway as a convenient turnaround point. Now, with the toll gate in place, that nuisance disappeared overnight. Then, there were the actual toll revenues. I hadn't expected to make much money. That wasn't the point. But over the first 3 months, Liberty Way generated almost $2,000, mostly from service providers visiting homes deeper in the subdivision who found my road a convenient shortcut. I established a simple system of access levels. Friends and allies like Ellen received unlimited free access cards. Neutral neighbors could purchase annual passes at a reasonable $100 rate. Delivery services, mail carriers, and emergency vehicles had automatic free access. As for the HOA board members, they paid full price every time. Diane Keller, who lived on the far side of the development, had to either drive an extra mile around or pay $5 each way to cut through Liberty Way. I took particular satisfaction in watching her Lexus SUV stop at the gate each time, her pinched expression visible through my security cameras as she tapped her credit card on the reader. "You're being petty," my sister told me during her visit. "Gloriously so," I agreed, showing her the toll collection report. A month after the toll gate was installed, I received a formal cease and desist letter from an attorney representing the HOA. Angela responded with a 12-page legal brief so thoroughly researched and footnoted that we never heard from them again. The broader impact on Maple Creek was more significant than I'd anticipated. At the next HOA election, Diane Keller was voted out as board president, replaced by my neighbor Ellen, who ran on a platform of reasonable enforcement and homeowner respect. Tom Wilson and Margaret Simmons chose not to run again, and Chuck Davis was reduced to a regular board member without his previous influence. Under Ellen's leadership, the board revised several of the most draconian covenants and established a more transparent process for variance requests. The 75-foot driveway rule was amended to apply only to new construction, with existing properties explicitly grandfathered in. 6 months after Liberty Way opened for business, I installed a small covered rest area near the toll gate with a coffee machine and a donation jar labeled Road Maintenance Fund. It became a casual gathering spot for morning dog walkers and evening strollers, fostering a sense of community that had been lacking under the previous regime. Not everyone was happy, of course. A few residents, mostly Diane's close allies, continued to complain about that ridiculous toll road at HOA meetings, but their objections grew fewer and fainter as time passed. One crisp autumn morning, almost exactly a year after I'd received that first violation notice, I was adding coffee supplies to the rest area when a familiar Lexus pulled up to the toll gate. Diane Keller rolled down her window and tapped her credit card on the reader with a practiced motion. As the gate lifted, she hesitated, then pulled up beside where I stood. "Efficient operation you've got here," she said stiffly. "Thank you. Coffee?" I offered, holding up a fresh cup. She seemed taken aback by the gesture. Yes, thank you." I handed her the cup through her car window. We regarded each other in awkward silence for a moment. "The road looks good," she finally said. "Well maintained." "I take pride in it." Another pause. "You know, the previous covenant about driveway length wasn't actually about aesthetics. It was a safety measure, ensuring emergency vehicles could easily access homes." "I know. That's why emergency vehicles have free access to Liberty Way. In fact, the fire chief tells me response times to the back half of the subdivision have improved by nearly 2 minutes since they started using my road." Diane took a sip of coffee, looking thoughtful. I may have been overzealous in my approach. Coming from Diane, this was tantamount to a full apology and confession of sins. "We all get a bit carried away sometimes," I offered magnanimously. She nodded once, sharply, then put her car in gear. "Good day, Mr. Morgan. Good day, Mrs. Keller. Enjoy your drive on Liberty Way." As her car disappeared around the bend, I couldn't help but smile. In trying to enforce an unreasonable rule, the HOA had inadvertently created something better than a driveway. They'd created a community gathering spot, a more efficient emergency access route, and yes, a source of modest income for me. Sometimes, the best response to petty tyranny isn't just to fight it, it's to transform it into something unexpectedly beneficial. My too-long driveway had become Liberty Way in more than just name. It had become a symbol of standing up to unreasonable authority and finding creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. And at $5 a crossing, it was teaching that lesson to Diane Keller, one toll at a time.